be able to talk to you about the very best subject in the known and unknown universe, and that's Logic Pro. Today we're going to be talking about signal flow extensively. We're going to be talking about the mixer. Able to talk to you about this is an ongoing conversation we've been having the last couple of weeks. It looks like we're going to be digging deep into the group inspector, which is really great. Talk about an efficient workflow. Finally, if we have time for it, we're going to get into VCA groups, when and why you would use them, along with automating groups and so much more. So let's get right into it. Happy Monday. Let's go. Hey, all right. Here we go. What's up, guys? How are you? Let's go. I hope you're feeling good today. It's time to get back into it. Let's talk about Logic Pro, shall we? So much more to cover. This is such an extensive program. I'm your host, Eddie Gray. Let's get into it. So look, I've been studying this program for 7 years, and I legitimately thought that I actually knew this program. And let me tell you, there is always more to learn and unearth. You better be ready. We're about to get into it. All right, cool. All right, guys, hey, we are Resources for the Modern Creative. We've been covering the Logic User Guide for weeks on end. This is happening every Monday through Saturday, 6 days a week, and we're bringing you the most detailed content on YouTube, the internet today, okay? All right, so who is presenting this information? My name is Eddie Gray, and I've been a student of the craft for the last 7 years. Actually, prior to this, I had another career, and it was always a dream of mine to be a self-sufficient, fully self-expressed creative, to be able to live the life. And since having these aspirations, I've been able to do trailers, commercials, all sorts of great stuff in the market, been a head composer for several shows, and met a lot of great people, done a lot of great stuff. And finally, I'm in a position now where I get to serve and I get to give, and I've been looking forward to this day for a very long time. So while we're here and while we have the opportunity to learn Logic Pro, I'm going to give you my all, and so we're going to get right into it. If you have questions, hit me in the chat. And as always, if you want to learn more about the program, hit us up, support@hfmusicacademy.com. All right, so look, we're getting into creating tracks for signal flow in Logic. So when we refer to signal flow, we're referring to the order of things and how they're positioned and how every component can affect something else in the channel strip. For example, we can have the channel EQ, we can have a compressor instantiated, and these two, when processed in serial, meaning like one next to the other, they'll affect how the other one reacts. On the same token, if we hit the mute button or we drag down the volume fader, that's going to affect the signal altogether. We can add a MIDI effects insert into a software instrument, then that changes the dynamics of the signal flow. And so we want to get clear about what's possible inside of a channel strip, not just the ABCs such as mute, solo, volume, but other things such as changing the output as we did in the previous session, and also utilizing parallel processing by means of bus and sends. So let's go ahead and read a little bit here. Signal flow channel strips, which include aux output channel strips, do not contain regions. So there's a difference between the channel strip and the track which contains regions. So the signal flow channel strips serve to route the signals from other channel strips. So there's a lot you can do here, guys. We're talking about resampling. We're talking about extensive creative workflows. Signal flow channel strips do not normally appear in the tracks area. However, you can add signal flow channel strips. To be specific, when they're using signal flow channel strips, they're referring to aux tracks, just to be clear. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, let's say you want to automate these and you want to have the tracks area show the parameters in question, something that we can utilize. Then it says here that you can add signal flow channel strips to the tracks area. either as individual tracks, right? So we can have just one track showing up in the tracks area. Also, we can have track stacks, and that can be a summing and or a folder stack. So we can organize these aux tracks if need be. How do we actually create these individual tracks for signal flow channel strips? Well, you want to go into the mixer, and then you want to create track stacks for selected channel strip or Control T. So let's look at that really quick. Let me bring you guys in. Hope you're feeling good on this Monday. And as always, just as a reminder to put the most important things in your life first. So this is why we are working on Logic, because it is uber important. All right, so we're in the mixer, right? X. And so I would love, love, love to see these 3 tracks, which are currently my auxes, bus 130, bus 131, and bus 1. I would like to have these instantiated on the tracks area. How do I do that? Again, focus on these, control click, create track. That's one way. Another way, you go into options and create tracks for selected channel strips. That's a second way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that. When I close the mixer, key Command X, these 3 tracks have now been instantiated inside of the tracks area. Normally they're within just the mixer, right? We don't have the capability of seeing them in the tracks area, but here we are. Everything is right where it needs to be. Now, personally, I would get these out of the way. So I'm going to create a group by holding Shift, clicking 1, 2, 3, and then dragging all the way to the top of the screen. So essentially, they're out of the way. Now, let's say you wanted to automate a little bit of reverb. You can do that just like that. And probably the best practice is to make sure that these are all inside of a folder stack if you're not going to process. But I would probably stick to summing stacks so that if I wanted to process these for creative purposes, then I can do so, right? And this could even be something practical like, there's too much low end in this. Why don't I take out some of the low end from the effects, right? And so I'll do that there. I'll go ahead, select track number 1, okay? Shift, return, which allows me to enter the text entry box, and I'll call this effects, all right? And then I'm going to close this track stack simply by hitting the disclosure triangle there, or hitting the key command, Control, Command, left arrow. Cool. All right. So that's good. That's pretty clear. Now I have actual auxiliary channels inside of the tracks area. And again, some of the purposes, not just the clarity that you experience by seeing everything in the tracks area, but the ability to automate and have much more control over those parameters. Yeah, you got to love it. Okay, so we talked about creating a track stack for the selected channel strips as well. I've talked to you about the difference between track stacks and folder stacks. If you watch some of the previous videos, to sum it up in a sentence, track stacks, you can process a subgroup such as the drums, apply a band pass or reverb to drums, saturation, and a folder stack, purely organizational. I can utilize mute, solo, the volume strip, and that's it. So it's strictly organizational. All right, let's go into the overview of groups in Logic Pro, page 581, brought to you by hfmusicacademy.com. Prior to mixing, you may find it useful to define some logical channel strip groups. Okay, you could, for example, group all the drums under one drum group, right? So we're not necessarily talking about track stacks now. You could, right? But we're giving you a third option. This would allow you to control the group meters such as volume, panning, mute, solo, sends, and so on. There's a lot more features. Using a single control while still maintaining the relative parameter values of each channel strip. Okay, so let's think here. If we have the possibility to edit an entire group and do it all in one motion with one key command, with one decision, one selection, would that help you out? Yes, it's a great choice, and so we're going to learn this now. You can also automate. This is where it really shines. This lets you easily set the change for a parameter of a group of channel strips over the course of a project. All right, so if you're easily going to change this, we're going to need a method to implement, and so that's what we're going to cover right now. For example, you may wish to group all of the guitars together and have all of their relative volumes change at the same time throughout your project. So rather than having to adjust, let's pretend these are all guitars, this guitar and this guitar and this one all at the same time, right? Some guys have 8 guitars. Some girls have 12 guitars on their tracks. So we're not trying to do that. We want to create groups to expedite the workflow. You can have a maximum of 32 groups. Okay, these are the kinds of things that we want to highlight. Now, some of this information could be outdated, but at least we have a sense that 32 groups is more or less where it's at. And a channel strip can be a member of multiple groups. So we're also going to highlight that because now we have the capability of not just forming groups within Logic Pro, but we can also form subgroups. So think of this. You can have track stacks, you can have folder stacks, you can have track stacks inside of folder stacks, and then on top of that, we can have a group drum bus, if you will. We can have just the guitars, and then I can also create a group with just the drums and just the guitars, or let's say just the drums and just the bass. Now, why would you do this? Well, think of it. Let's say we get to a section, the bridge. Let's call it the bridge. All of a sudden, we realize the rhythm section's way too loud, it's out of context, right? All of a sudden now, I can take the volume of one track and all 16 other tracks, let's say, are now reduced relative to the changes that I'm making to my volume automation. This is really powerful. I'm going to give you an example in a second here. It is possible to use the aux channel strips for grouping purposes, but right? So they're addressing this. Look, we understand that you can use track stacks. That's what they're saying here. But with the aux channel strips, the emphasis is on controlling the channel strip signal flow. So what they're saying is, look, if you utilize track stacks, that's great. We want you to do this. Okay, this is a fantastic workflow. I normally wouldn't demonstrate this with effects because that's rather advanced. But let's say these two bass parts, right? Stay with me, Shift Command D. I'm creating a summing stack here. So yeah, of course I can add, low cut, high pass. We can create some kind of band pass. There's a lot there. But what's the point here is that the purpose of the track stack is to treat the entire group as a whole, right? The treatment, the EQ, compression, if it applies, saturation, spatial effects, bus and sends. The difference is when we utilize groups, my friends, we're talking about an entirely new set of controls and parameters to free our minds, our body, our hands, so that we can actually focus on the music, right? And so this is when we're going to get into groups. Now, how do we get these going? All right, well, let me create a group for you so you understand what I'm saying, okay? So we can do this here in the tracks area, but honestly, it's better if you have a screen set or you just open up the mixer. So let's see if I open up a mixer here. I'm going to hit the key command 2. So you can see that I have the tracks area. So I'll hit command 2 again. And now we're not looking at the tracks area as I've deleted it, and I will resize this one. So every single time I hit 1, I've got screen set number 1, and 2 yields screen set number 2. In this case, the mixer, but it could have been anything, right? And these are the decisions that you can also make here if you don't like key commands or are just getting used to them. So I've got screen set number 2. Cool. All right. So I'm going to select these 3 channel strips because I want to include them all in one group. And so I will click here and I will select group 1, right? We can open the group settings and this will summon the group inspector, which you can also find in the tracks area on the top left. We'll take a look at this in a second. But when I open up group 1, you'll see that all of a sudden, this new lane pops up. What am I referring to? right here, right? There's group 1. Now, I'm not going to do this for all the tracks, but you kind of understand the principle now. So I've created a group, in this case, group number 1. Now, you might have noticed I included the track stack. You may not want to do that, you may, but for now, I will take it out of the group. So no group, just these 2. All right, so let's the key command 1 now, which brings me back to screen set number 1. Yeah, okay, and so we're in screen set number 1, and now I want to start making some decisions, but I don't want to go back and forth between this channel strip and that channel strip. I would like them to operate together. This is where groups shine. Now, you'll notice this doesn't have a name yet, the top here in the group inspector. And so I'm going to name this. I'll double click and I'll call this base GRP. Fantastic. So now you'll see that the groups are active. You'll see that the group is on and ready to go. Now, something that you may not know and or utilize at the moment is that you can actually hide the group. One button and it's gone. Check it out. We're going to hide it. Boom. Of course, the track stack is still here as it's no longer part of the group, but by hitting that, now we can see the plugins are back and ready. So when I hit on settings here in the disclosure triangle, now I can actually make this come to life. What do you want this group to do? Well, I would like this group to allow editing, and I would like it to quantize and lock the audio. When you initiate this feature, you'll notice, hold on, I'm noticing something's missing from this track. Where is this MIDI region? I think it was lost in the process. There we go. All right, good. So you'll notice that, again, all of these 2 tracks, track 11 and 12, are part of a group. And so I'm going to go ahead, turn on editing. I want to quantize and lock the audio. Now, when I do that, what's interesting is, of course, with audio tracks, it says quantize and locked audio only refers to audio, right? And so you'll notice a green button here. And this right here is going to determine how the audio responds to your decisions. All right, what else can we do? Well, we have 1 software instrument track, 1 MIDI track, and then 1 audio track. So I also want the track alternatives to reflect one another. I'd like the inputs to be the same. You can make all these decisions. I want the colors to be the same, the track zoom level to be the same. So for example, if I, hit, let's see, if I zoom in on this one a little bit, it will change the zoom setting of this one automatically, right? Let's see what else is there. Yeah, so they both kind of zoom in and out together if you resize them inside of the track header. All right, if you choose a certain send or make decisions with sends, the same happens with this one. For example, I'll instantiate bus number 1, let's say, and so you'll see on track 11 it's been instantiated, and so if I make if I have this instantiated as well, and I make a decision such as, let's just do some basic automation right now. Now remember, we're talking about bus 1, yeah? And so let's say I make a simple decision here. You can see that they're both reacting together. Now I haven't even touched track number 12. It's really special that I get to let go and delegate an entire workflow to an automated process, right? So that's really cool. Of course, if you use a lot of effects, you might want to turn all these on, but panning applies should you have multi-track drums and you want to expedite that workflow, because that takes a lot of time when you're editing that kind of stuff. Recording, if you want to record, let's say, a live band situation or just a live acoustic guitar player or something like that, you can record performances in this way where you have 5 different microphones, overheads, maybe something right on the guitar, what have you. And so this would record the entire performance. And if you made decisions to 1 microphone, it would also reflect on the others as well. So there's a lot here. Really, really nice that we can utilize the group inspector. And the only thing that differs a little bit is just the quantized locked audio. We're not going to see that with software instruments. So that's great. Let's... yeah, so to kind of to close on that, the auxes are emphasizing, or the track stack, should I say, they're emphasizing controlling the channel strip signal flow, whereas the group inspector does a host of other things as we just looked at. Let's continue on here. Page 582, read by Eddie Gray. Use the groups inspector to define the behavior of each mixer group, right? So we define the behavior of each one of the groups that you enable. The groups inspector appears in the track inspector. Okay, so this is on the left side of the screen. When you hit the key command I, right, this general area is called the inspector. Now within the inspector, we have various kinds of inspectors, one of them being the group inspector. When you have created one or more groups, this is when we actually get to meet and see the group inspector. Otherwise, it's not there. It's kind of in the background. Okay, you can open this as a floating window as well. Just depends on how you want to do it. So I can literally grab this thing and just have it shift over like that. I also have it set to a key command. Just need to remember what that key command is. Here, let me type here, group inspector. Create group, right? That brings up. So I guess it's not on my menus here, but let me see if I could find this. One sec. Nope. Okay. I'll have to look for it inside of the key command window. I believe it's Command G. Let me just make sure. Hold on. Nope, that creates a group for me. Shift G makes them active. Maybe Shift Command G. No. Okay, let's find it really quick. Group inspector, show or hide. So I have it set to F6. Let me find that key. Right. That's F5. Here's F6. There it is right there. Shift Command G is probably a good key command for that. Just throwing that out there. All right, cool. So once you bring this up, remember, it's not on technically speaking. The only time it's on is when it's active. This is some of the verbiage used in Logic Pro. Very pertinent. You see this a lot. Okay, this active component. We also see this inside of Snap Automation, right? It has to be active in order for it to participate and work the way it needs to work, right? So once we're inside of this menu, we can resize to some extent. It's not that robust, but we get a sense of where it is. Again, we can hide entire groups, right? I'm not going to do that right now. We know that group number 1 is called what? Base GRP. I had to undo this a second ago, but there we go. There's another group, which I don't remember what was created, but anyhow, we can adjust these from time to time if your needs change throughout the session, as they often do, right? Sometimes you're working on drums, sometimes you're working on vocals, and those needs are going to change. And of course, we can create unique settings per group, right? So if I do have drums GRP, I can have completely different settings that vary greatly from group number 1. All right, so we know pretty much what everything does. I would say that if there's one last thing left pending here, it's the action gear menu. All right, you can actually do quite a bit here. So let's say you want to create a new group and you're not into key commands and maybe you forget where to find things. These menu items are pivotal, right? If you wanted to delete a group, you can do that here. To select members as a part of a group. So for example, I will select group number 2 and I will select members. Select members. I don't see a menu. What's going on? Okay. Not seeing how that's working. Add selected channel strips. Okay. So I have a feeling the way that this works is when we, for example, want to select this and that, then we go into select members or add selected channel strips. So I'll select these two for the drums group. All right, let's see if this resonates inside of the mixer. Why don't we choose our screen set number 2? Okay, so you can see that's how we created that group there. Select members. Okay, now something else that's really interesting is, let's say I have nothing selected. Now I'm in the mixer and I want to select all the bass tracks or anything containing group number 1. I go into the action gear menu and I hit select here. Guess what happens, right? Selecting everything for you. Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, apply some tape saturation or an SSL to make it more healthy sounding. You could do that. We can add groups that are in key focus. So if I focus on, let's say, I know this is not a drum part here, but it's cool just for the sake of example. And we wanted to select drums. So now there's 2 things in key focus. In the mixer, we have the guitar track, which I know it's not a drum track, but just an example. And in the group inspector, I have the drum group selected, right? So now all of a sudden, I have the ability to go to the action gear menu and add these to the group if I wanted to, right? I can add track number, 7 to the drum group if I wanted to. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So now it's a part of this group, you can see here. And by the way, I don't prefer to do it this way, but I just want to make sure that all my people have everything they need in order to thrive. I prefer just going in here and just selecting no group. That's just the way I would do it, okay? And something else that should be mentioned here is if you wanted to remove it from the group without necessarily having to go into the group lane, as I've showed you before, here, then, which we can't access in the tracks area, by the way, then I would go in here and I would remove, right? Remove from this group, and that would take care of that. We can copy settings if need be. Let's say you have, I don't know, another drum kit or something, and you just want to copy all the settings without having to redo everything all over again, and you can do that there. Cool. All right, good. I just want to skim through this and see if there's anything else that we missed. Probably the biggest takeaway for most of my my new people, like if you're really going to get into this, and even my novices, let's say you wanted to hide a group. Let's go back into screen set number 1. All right, so let's say the bass and the drums are getting in my way now, right? If I click on that H, hides everything, right? Hide the bass and let's hide the drums. Gone. So now I have a little bit more room to work. And I think to myself, hey, oh, this track here is, part of the drum group. Fantastic. It's in key focus inside the tracks area. I click on track number 2 inside of the group inspector, right? So now I'm selecting group number 2, and then I would click right there, and I would add this selected channel strip inside of group number 2. So it hasn't hidden yet because I haven't performed the action while it was contained within the group. And so you can see now that I've greatly reduced the size of my track count, giving me a much better user experience. Cool. This is Eddie Gray reading the Logic User Guide. This is all brought to you by hfmusicacademy.com. Check us out. The most incredible platform for helping you license your music and monetize your music. All right, so we pretty much have covered all this. If you want everything to mirror itself, if you want all the tracks to mirror themselves, you can, choose things such as coloring, like as I stated, zooming a track, right? Everything kind of levels out. And why is that important? By the way, let's say you have, 24 tracks of drums or something, or even 4 guitars. If I resize one of them, and it's like that, look at this. This isn't gonna work. You see what I'm looking at here, right? That's just it's an eyesore. We can't do that. And so when we have the zoom setting, I'm wondering if I could even Command Z this. I don't know if I can. No, I don't think you can. Yeah, you can't do that. So this is tough, right? Because it's hard to look at. I zoomed in too much. So a quick fix for this, if this ever happens to you, is to utilize a great feature inside of the toolbar, which is below the control bar. It's called track zoom. Okay, and so what that does, really nice. Look, it actually expands the track. At least it should. Maybe because I'm zoomed in too tight here. Wait, did it happen yet? Hold on. Yeah, it actually. Yeah, see this. That's the way it should look. See how it kind of brings it out. So yeah, if you ever get yourself in a bind like that where you zoom in a little too hard, another thing you could do is just zoom in. You You can utilize the zoom sliders if you wanted to, like do something like that, where like even if it is very condensed or squished, right, small, you resize it incorrectly, then you can at least access that and then reopen it up by hovering in between the tracks and accessing the resize tool, just like that. All right, I'm gonna click the background of the workspace. I'm gonna hit Z. Now we're back to the macro view, and let's finish up this conversation on group inspectors. All right, I've showed you how to create the groups themselves, right? It looks like there's another way to access this. Mix, create. Oh, okay. No, I thought there was. Hold on. Mix, show groups. That may be wrong. Hold on. I want to just make sure I'm giving you the right info. Yes. Well, okay. Yeah. So, it says in the mixer that you could, in the guide that you can go to mix and show groups, but that's actually not here. And so you guys know what we do when we find something that's not working for us. All right, good. And of course, when I lose it, right? Because we're having this fun here, we're dancing with Logic here. So when I drop the ball, that's what I get. Okay. So just so this is not one-sided. We're calling it on both sides. All right. So cool. This is not officially on Logic, right? Unless you're in a previous version, which it might be, then excuse me for that. But there you go. We're striking this through. Edgar Rothermick, we're voting him in to update the Logic Pro user guide. That would be amazing, right? We would benefit so much. So yeah, we need this. So I think that, let me see, click the group slot of a channel strip, then choose open group settings. I do want to check just that last thing because I want to give you the right information. So it looks like if you open group settings inside of the mixer, this is another way to open up the group inspector. All right, cool. Or the group floating window, as they would call it. All right, so we talked about the membership and how to get different groups involved. I love that they call this group membership. Cool. Yeah, and you know, we can have subgroups and multiple groups added as well if that became a feature. Why is this important? Well, let's say all you wanted to do was look at certain, you know, just the guitars, right? I can hide everything except those features. So let me create one last group, for example, and I'll call this group everything but, and you're gonna have to kind of bear with me here because, you know, this is not a real track. This is just something I made for this series. So I'll call this everything but the melody or something like that. So you'll notice that everything is selected inside the tracks area. I hit the key command X, and then I'll go inside of the mixer. Or you could also go to the screen set, but I'm just expediting this. And then we're going to create a new group, but this one is called everything but melody. Okay. So then now we can affect all the stuff except the melody, right? So if I hit the H, we're looking at just the melodic material. This is really powerful in that we can hide everything except the drums. Now, of course, is there a little bit of setup time? Yeah. But when you're writing a masterpiece, these things are required. I mean, it's just part of it. We need to get used to these kinds of workflows. Now, if you're working on a song and the B-side, it's a throwaway, it's a song that you're just getting paid a couple bucks, I always encourage you, always, to give it your all, right? Give it everything. But I also want you to be efficient with your time. Only enough hours, only enough on the tank, or there's only enough energy in the tank. And so if we're really going to be efficient, really make the most of it, then we have to have these things in check and ready to use. So this is contextual. Yes, I'm not going to do this with something that has a turnaround time of 4 hours, of course. But, you know, if I'm writing something, I've had, you know, nationally indicated placed tracks on massive commercials, international commercials. I took my time with that one, guys. Best believe 2 weeks, but it was also nice paycheck, right? So it required that kind of attention to detail. Okay, so this is great. I think you have a good sense of groups and why you would utilize them. You can disable everything, right? So let's say you have all sorts of eclectic features and you just want to turn everything off. Shift G does that. And that can be confirmed here. Groups active or, of course, inactive inside of Logic Pro. If you want to turn that on, of course, you would hit the same corresponding key command. Now, I've showed you how to automate within this already and how essentially you would select editing, automation, and all the various things that you would like to automate if need be, such as volume, your sends, things like that. Okay, so when we come back from a word from our sponsors, we're going to be talking about VCA groups and how they differ. Okay, so we just talked about groups in Logic Pro, and when I see you in a second here, we're going to be talking about VCA groups. All right, guys, I'll see you in a second. Good. So yeah, we've been talking about Logic Pro, all the different facets, such a deep program. I'll tell you, I really thought that I had it all covered. Like I read all the books on Logic, everything by Edgar Rothemick. I watched all the series, anything that I could get my hands on. Took extensive notes on every single course. Right? I thought, well, surely it's all been covered. Like that's it, right? I did everything. I climbed every mountain, did everything. Right here, the Logic User Guide brought to you by hfmusicacademy.com. This is the source. This is the source. And I'm so glad that I get to bring it to you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to get right into it. I want to cover VCA groups. I think this is an underutilized subject in the world of Logic Pro. And so without further ado, let's cover VCA groups inside of Logic Pro. All right. So we're talking about VCA groups. All right. So in order to have this conversation, and in order to be able to talk about it as a whole, to cover the entire expanse of this particular subject, we have to go back in time. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, when hardware mixing desks oftentimes contained separate channels. Now, these channels were specifically designed to give the engineer the option to sub-mix, to be able to create a mix by routing and controlling the signal flow, as we've been talking about, of multiple channels all at once using one single channel strip. Now, the amazing part is that these VCAs, these channel strips, they utilized a technology that was very pertinent at the time, still is, but back then it was the creme de la creme. And it was called voltage controlled amplifiers. Now, what was unique about these was that contained in their circuitry, in their analog characteristic, these submix channels contained a sound, a kind of polish, a treatment, if you will. And so they were aptly named voltage controlled amplifiers. Now you can use VCA channel strips to control the volume, the automation of a submix, or of tracks that are assigned to the VCA group. Okay. Now, something that hasn't been made clear within Logic yet is when I do create these VCAs, am I inheriting the benefits of an analog workflow? And so we'll find that out. Okay. So let's get clear on what VCA groups are exactly, right? Give me some basic terminology and working definitions. VCA groups can contain channel strips that are routed to different outputs. Okay, so here we go. This is where it starts. Okay, we have to get clear on the definitions. So at the top of the list, these VCA groups, they can contain these channel strips that can be routed to other outputs, not just the usual 1 and 2, right? Now you can start utilizing hardware, perhaps a headphone amplifier, something like that, right? And you can utilize VCA groups in this way. Let me give you more. Number 2, VCA channel strips use less processing power than aux channel strips utilized as a group master. So we're looking at the advantages. Why would I use a VCA rather than an auxiliary channel strip, or what we would consider to be a track stack? All right. So we're basically talking about folder stacks, in essence, and track stacks, and what the difference is, because a folder stack is really just a VCA. All right. So the VCA channel strips, they're more efficient, right? I always tell you to use summing stacks, a track stack, especially as a beginner, because I don't want you to overthink the process. But at some point, you will become a Logic Pro Power user, and then it'll be time to transition and change the workflow. Be more methodical. Be more precise. So that's another reason why you would use a VCA, because at some point you get to utilize the tools to meet your needs. So at some point you'll know, I know I'm not going to treat this particular group. I don't need to process, a bunch of percussion instruments together, or I don't need to process the sound effects or Foley, right? I don't need to do that. All I need to do is organize these within a VCA or a folder stack. So adjusting the volume of the VCA, it changes the volume of each individual channel. All right, so we're going to highlight that too. And we should also highlight the fact that this uses less processing power. This can be important when mixing. So let's talk about this. So for example, if you're using post-fader send effects, the amount of signal sent to an effect by a channel assigned to a VCA group follows the VCA group volume changes. So this also has implications when it comes to mixing. Okay, so they're saying here that if you use post-fader send effects, the amount of signal sent to an effect by a channel assigned to a VCA group follows the VCA group volume changes. So we're going to have to look at that a little bit more extensively. Hopefully I can give you some numbers and figures. Let me take a shot of this. Good. Okay. Create a VCA channel strip. How do we do this? Cool. So once we have a couple tracks selected, it looks like we can go to options, create new VCA fader from the mixer menu bar. Okay. So let's look at this. I'll go to options. Okay. And I have create new VCA for selected channel strips. All right, so right now I have the melody selected, as you may have remembered. So I'm going to click on that. All right, one thing changed. One, I have something being routed at the end of the signal flow. Now, the truth is the last stop is always the stereo out, but this allows me to stay organized with the VCAs. So this is an appropriate place for them within your console or your mixer. Yeah. So what's interesting is you saw that these three were selected, but it's really hard to recognize how they're even attached at this point. Now I'll show you how it works, obviously, but something that needs to be stated is that when I go into view, and when I go into channel strip components, we have to enable the VCA setting here, okay? So let me go ahead and do that so we can see where this, okay, good. All right, so what we'll see here at the bottom of the screen is a lane titled VCA. So we can see these are all being routed right to VCA number 1. Now, as stated, I can't do any processing to this, and I doubt that it's actually adding anything in terms of harmonics, right, such as an SSL workflow, but still, the fact that I can control these outside of my session, really magical. Now, I'll show you what I mean. So the melody is this bit here. Check it out. can see that I controlled 3 channel strips, count them, 3, all with one volume slider, right? So this made it really easy, and I cannot overemphasize how this is important, especially when it comes to post-production. I can't tell you how many songs that I've been able to work on, complete, pitch, close, and monetize where I utilized VCA faders. Because what ends up happening is that at the end of the process, all I have to do is make my new changes, right, to the channel strips. And of course, this can also be inserted into the tracks area, so long as it's selected, of course, which it is right now. And if you may have remembered, if I create track, or if I go to the options menu bar and I create track for selected channel strip, we don't want a track stack, we want a track, right? All of a sudden, I have VCA group number 1 on the tracks area. So this is magical. Why? Well, again, when we talk about automation, I'm like, all right, cool. I like the melody really loud during the intro, right? We need that. We need that energy. We need that love. But when we get to bar 9, right, the song shifts. So what I want to do here is I want to bring this down by 1 dB, right? That's gonna move these out of the way, right? Allow the bass to position itself a little bit better, right? If I have a vocal or a main melody, such as fairy phrases here, track number 9, right? This may fit a little bit better. Let's check that out. Good. Now, as a whole, it sounded pretty good, but the level was just relatively too quiet. So I'm going to utilize trim automation right here. Okay, and I'm just going to click, creates an offset, right? The pattern, the automation choices were all the same, but I'm lifting them up by, I don't know, I think that was 6 dBs. So let's listen again. All right, cool. So that makes sense, right? Now I was able to take that and efficiently, rather than having to create groups and all that. So, Eddie, this is a contradiction. You just told me to create groups instead. Guys, this is a post-production feature. Now, of course, you can use it whenever you want, but I'm giving you some guidelines here that can help you. Whereas groups are dedicated to the mixing, doing everything in the session, right? All automation choices. VCA groups, in my opinion, my humble opinion, because you guys know I'm a student first of the game, are meant for and better suited for post-production purposes. You're at the end of the line, you're finishing up the song, and it's time to go for the jugular and finish the song. And so we route everything out to VCA, right? Everything out to VCA groups, and all of a sudden I have control as a whole. I can look at the song objectively because all has been routed to a couple of groups. So I'll give you a second example, and then we'll continue on with the Logic Pro user guide. So not only have I created a couple groups with the drums, I think I made one but the melody. Let's do one for, I guess, just the, no, I just did that. Let's do the bass guitars, but a VCA, because I previously created a group. And so I've got all of these channel strips selected. I just want to make sure that this is true. Yes. And now you got to think about this. These two are being routed because they're a track stack to this one, bus 132. And so there's no need necessarily to grab these and route those, because I could change, the routing per se. So I'm just going to send the entire bass group out to it, right? And that'll control everything from a distance. Now, again, you don't have to do it that way, but that's just giving you some ideas. So Mixer X, click here, create new group. That's called VCA2. I will double click there. And I should probably also go here. I think this was the drums. I forget now. But cool. We got these two selected, right? So we have the drums. We got the bass. Then if I want this in the track, I hit create track, go back into the tracks area and check this out. Now I have a proper mixing console workflow where the main tracks are all being routed to the groups, right? And so that gives me a little bit more leverage and control. There's no one way to do this, but I really do believe in this workflow, especially if you're trying to create quality music, right? It's not just like a quick turnaround thing. Okay, so you now know how to create them. Of course, if you wanted to remove, you can do that. Simple as pie. We just go in here and let's say, hey, we don't want this to be a part of track 3, so we'll just say no group. And then now, right, they've been omitted from the pack. Page 587 within the Logic Pro user guide. So it looks like we're going into the world of surround panning. And to be honest, I'm very excited because there's a lot of misconceptions, right? A lot of misinformation about what this is and what it does. And so we're here to clear up all of the noise. I think the way we'll do this is we'll read the first section, we'll get clear on the objective, and then we will properly visit this tomorrow. All right, let's go from the top. Surround panning in the mixer in Logic Pro. You can mix down in several surround formats, even if your audio hardware offers only 2 outputs. Okay, so that's something you want to look at. Okay, you want to look at that. It says here that you have the capability of using the surround format, despite the fact that most hardware, most interfaces only provide 2 outputs. Okay, because it would be difficult to mix or record in surround without being able to hear the result, it's best not to select this option if you're monitoring or mixing through stereo. Okay, so look, this right here, it told us clearly, do not use surround mixing if you're monitoring or mixing through stereo speakers. That ends the conversation. So if you've been thinking that this is a cool effect and this is really great, I like to, and you're sending this to publishers or you're playing this, out of Bluetooth speakers, I don't know, maybe you're performing out or something like that. The deal is that you should not use this because it's not helping. It's actually just muddying up the waters. All audio, instrument, and aux channel strips can be individually set to different surround formats. So we're about to get into some pretty complex stuff. All right, even if you're a beginner, I want you to watch this because I want you to understand it. So if somebody tries to give you some misinformation on another YouTube channel, or a friend tells you something or other that this is a great thing, you need to know the how and the when to use this. I'm not saying do not use it ever. If you want to experiment, this has a place for headphone mixes. But the fact of the matter is that if you're releasing music and you're releasing it for streaming purposes, performance, what have you, this is not applicable nor is it relevant. Okay? Set a channel strip's output to surround. How do we do this? Well, number one, you have to have the advanced preferences selected and ready to rock. So because I know I shouldn't be using this because I don't have surround, I don't use it. So I have it disabled, right? I don't use the score editor, same bit. But we're about to utilize this tech, right, for the sake of education and for all intents and purposes, the goal is to get rid of the noise. I want you to be clear. I want you to understand why you would use this. We're getting into a new age of virtual mixing, 3D, 4D mixing. For the most part, in the next couple of years, a lot of us are going to have jobs in the world of virtual reality, Oculus, all this good stuff. And so we need to be prepared, at the very least, be informed. So when you are having an education, so that when you are, I don't know, listening to a podcast, you're on the up and up when it comes to the information. I'll never forget one time I was having a conversation when I was a newbie, and because I was familiar with the terminology, I was able to hang in the conversation. I was able to make it out and not look like a fool, basically. So you want to make sure that if you're a newbie, that you get as much information as you can, so that when you're in groups, webinars, what have you, that you at least have a basic understanding of the subject matter. So let's keep going here. I have turned on in the advanced preferences, right? And so then I'll control click here, and I now have binaural panning available to me, right? So that now I can utilize this. Let's see what else it says here. If you click and hold the channel strip output slot, you can choose output surround. Okay, cool. Let's check that out. So I'm going to go, instead of stereo out, I have surround. So I will click on that, and now I see a new menu. Can you guys see this? Little diagram looks really interesting. See, how do we use this? It looks like the functionality is pretty basic. You grab what looks to be the green dot in the panning field to the desired location. So if you're using headphones, this is going to be immediately audible. You're going to feel like you're in outer space or something. When you option click it, of course, it's going to reset it back to its default value, which is front and center. So what I want you to do here is, solo a track. Make sure you're wearing headphones. Make sure the advanced preferences are set so that surround is on and ready. Your output, in my case, software instrument track, is set to surround, right? And then now I can start playing with this. And so the idea is that I'm positioning this, behind me, to laterally to the right side of my ear, the left side. You have more wiggle room. This can be right in the center of your cranium, so it feels like this is coming, out of your brain. So let's just take a quick listen to this. So that is pretty cool when you listen to it on headphones, because it really feels like somebody's behind you or, to the right of you. You get a lot more stretch when it comes to the audio possibilities here. So let's talk about this. An important part of mixing audio signals is the placement of individual sound sources, right? That's kind of mixing 101. Now, when you position these, they're all going to feel and sound a little bit different depending on how loud the signal source is. Most common recording and mixing techniques simply send a given signal at different levels to the available loudspeakers, or the two for stereo, or more for more elaborate setups, which we're not doing, but basically just two. So if you're positioning guitars on the left and right, and the drums, let's just say for now, down the middle, and the vocals in the middle, the synthesizers on, not hard left or right, but left, right, all of this is going to basically a two-way stereo image. That's it. The approach is somewhat flawed. Why? Because human beings, by their very nature, they're able to locate sound sources at different positions with just two ears. So, for example, if we were out in the woods, right, and a bear was attacking another animal, we would be able to listen to that despite it being 20 feet away. Let's say they were behind us, we can listen to that. It's very audible. Virtually all spatial information for all the sounds the listener hears is included in the two signals arriving at the two eardrums. So, from these signals, human beings can determine characteristics such as interaural time. Would love to hear more on that. Level differences. And based on the listening experience, information about the spatial origin of the sounds being heard. Are they coming from in front of you? Are they coming from behind you? another room, from the left, from the right, from above, from below. This ability to perceive where a sound originates is often referred to as binaural hearing. Okay, so when we get these concrete facts, we want to be able to right away just lay it down, highlight, make sure we know what is what. Page 588. In theory, the spatial positioning of any sonic experience can be reproduced during playback. So no special techniques need to be employed during recording. Okay, another one of these extremely important sentences. What they're saying is, hey, look, we can pretty much do anything when this is in playback. So you don't need to necessarily record this in a special way. So if you want the sound of a clock coming from behind your head, you don't need to implement some kind of strange recording technique. There is, however, one drawback to this approach. What's the drawback? Pay attention here. Every person has differently shaped ears. Wow. Different bodies. Wow. And head proportions. Wow. All of which influence the way sound arrives at the eardrum. Not to mention aspects such as hearing loss, right? Subjective responses to the sounds being heard. Everybody has different sensitivity levels, of course. Given these physical differences, each person listening to the same sound source while standing or sitting in the same position hears slightly different binaural signals. Therefore, perfect reproduction would only be possible if you could make a recording with tiny microphones placed inside your auditory canals. Because this is impractical, binaural hearing has been emulated in sound laboratories by using mannequin heads with built-in microphones. This approach has led to binaural recordings to fit the average person, which are more or less compatible with the way most people hear. Playback of binaural recordings is best suited to headphones. Okay, another one of these, okay? Now, what's interesting about this is that's not enough. There's a second part. Ideally combined with signal conditioning. Ooh, okay. So there's actually a second component here. And I guarantee you most people don't talk about this. I know it for a fact. I've seen people on YouTube literally just turn this thing on and be like, yeah, this is cool. You can just like play with it. It's great. But they don't mention the fact that it's specialized, right? It's something that we need to use in certain contexts. Given the specialized listening environment, it's also possible to reproduce these signals with loudspeakers utilizing a process known as crosstalk cancellation. No, I don't know anything about that. Let's keep going. As you are unlikely to have the tech required to make binaural recordings, your best chances of simulating binaural signals is by processing the sound signal on playback. Cool. So there's actual tech that allows you to record this stuff. But for most of us, we're going to just use binaural processing. This is known as head-related transfer function. That's a great name, which approximates the change that a signal undergoes on its way from the source to the eardrum. Okay, so we're going to stop there. And when I catch you guys next time, we're going to go over all these fine details. Let me go ahead and save this. I wanted to thank you for another opportunity. I wanted to wish you a happy Monday. I don't take this for granted. I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm working hard every day to give you the information that you need. Remember that information changes situations. So one day could be today, could be right now, could completely change the trajectory of your life. And if you just take that one moment in time that completely alters the momentum that you're currently experiencing, then you too can find your path and become a Logic Pro power user. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you so much again. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Make sure that you sub so that every time I'm on, you can just hit that notification bell. You'll be informed. Helps me with the YouTube channel tremendously. So yeah, I would highly appreciate that. Thank you. Let's get out of here. Take care of yourselves and stay up.